Kubala, Kubala. It's a glorious, glorious sunny day. I'm just sitting with my wonderful Lord husband, the King of the North. And I'm the prophetess, the high priestess of Kubala. My Lord, look at us. You've got yours somehow. The king so wanted an animal print. And this is literally very close to it, innit, my Lord?
That's correct.
And I've got my paint oranges and everything and tassels. And this survived the apocalypse, my Lord. This survived the fire.
Yeah.
Your bone. The relics of Kubala.
You like the top?
Which one? The one I'm wearing? Oh, this is everything, my king. I did a video even before I was talking about it. And you see, I've got my jeans. I'm wearing jeans.
Now this is Lady Safi, real name Aaliyah Johnson, who left the US, but she's a citizen at 18 or 19 to join the Kingdom of Kubala, where she was promised a life of royalty, but the truth was far darker. She was entering a cult.
Kubala, Kubala.
Ilizwe.
Kubala, Kubala.
Ilizwe.
Kubala, Kubala.
Ilizwe is here.
Let's talk about the Kubala Kingdom. As I said, this whole thing has been kind of insane to me because these used to be normal people at one point. Okay. So I first became aware of them through the wife. Her name is Jean Gasho. She also goes by Mary Tamar. But of course now we know she has a long name. Hold on, let me get into her real name. So her name is Prophetess Mary Tamar of the Free Worshippers, Priestess of Dreams of the Northern Kingdom, the Mother of Shaka and the Eagle of Napoleon. That is her official title. But back then she was just Jean. She was a blogger. She used to write about having 6 children, being a single mum to those 6 children because her ex-husband had pretty much up and left her one day. She then starts going to a prophetic church, and there is an incident in that prophetic church where there's some sort of inappropriate interaction between her and the prophet. I don't know if it was just like the one interaction or if it was an ongoing thing. However, she exposes that prophet, she exposes that ministry and that church, she leaves. Enter King Atahene, or as he's known back then, Kofi Ofer. Kofi Ofer, he also goes by Nino, I believe. In her blog post, she mentions how Nino wanted a single mother. He wanted a single mother. He was praying for a single mother, which, I mean, hello, red flag. Why are you praying on single mothers? And that's something he consistently does, mind you. They're all single mothers. They all have children. So yeah, she brings this man over to the UK. She is absolutely enamored by him. She calls him her Boaz, and Boaz is a Bible story. Boaz and Ruth, the story of Boaz and Ruth is a story of a woman who was sort of an outcast or uncared for being brought under the protection of Boaz, and he is her protector, her savior in a way. He keeps her safe. He makes sure she's fed. And that's how she saw Nino. She introduced Nino to us. She portrayed him to be an opera singer. He was a property mogul. He had a PR firm. Yeah, and there were a few other like enterprises that he had, right? And he was meant to be this business mogul. So that's how she sold this story to us, that she was being taken care of, her man was a millionaire, and she was getting swept off her feet, child. It later comes out that the properties were actually Airbnbs that he was subletting, and the PR firm was really him just doing work on Fiverr. So a lot of his background was overinflated. But alas, it didn't matter, right? Because Jean's in love with him. That is her man. They get married in a park. I don't know if it was a legally binding marriage because I believe one of Jean's children was the person to marry them. I think he was like the officiant. Officiant? Is that the word? I don't know. Yeah, he was the person that, did the ceremonies, did the vows and the ceremony in the park. They're married. And that's where the polygamy starts. Okay, he starts to talk about needing a second wife. He then brings in somebody who Jean calls the Shulamite. The Shulamite was an era, okay? There was the Shulamite. At one point, he had 3 wives. He had Jean, he had the Shulamite, and he had a third lady called Hagar. That's what they called her. These are all biblical names, by the way, and they all have a meaning behind them. Hagar was very much the handmaid. She was actually later on demoted to a concubine because, she didn't know how to act. The wives are a running theme. And it's always that the wives are young, they seem to be quite vulnerable, they're either single mothers, and again, I don't know why they all have to come from the States. His previous wife, now mind you, this lady that he has in the forest up there in Scotland, her family are looking for her. Her family are looking for her and her young child, okay? And this is not the first time. The wife they had before this one, we actually have to broach the topic in a really sensitive manner because she passed away.
I am Asnat of Atihene, the handmaiden of Queen Nandi, and the bondwoman of King Atihene of the North. Today, on this holy Sabbath, I just want to give you a bit of an inside scoop on the secrets of being a handmaid in Kubala. I'd say the first thing, the most important thing there is to know that sets us apart from the rest of the world, the most unique quality of a handmaid in comparison to the familiar role of a maid is that we observe the hierarchy, which means that in this polygamous marriage, the queen is the highest, is our superior of all the women in Kubala. We are inferior to her in every way. Immediately when you hear that, you could never imagine yourself uttering these words that I've said, but I'm not being abused. I am happy and in love with my life because this is my portion. This is who I was created to be. Jehovah will never give you more than you can bear. And he always requires much from those who he's given much to. So as I said, this is my portion. I am happily married to the king. I am not available to anyone in the world.
You're actually a married woman, Asnat.
Yes, my queen, I
we
am.
have people... Because they're used to these maids in this world and they think a maid is a maid. She's not available for the Lord, for the Lord of the house.
Yeah.
But a handmaiden, a true queen gives the handmaiden to the husband. So you are summoned before the king and I bring you to the king, isn't it?
Yes, my queen.
That is how it's done in the harem of the kingdom. So this is my handmaiden, and she is not free to any men who think they can come and say, oh, Asnat, are you going to get married? Are you married?
Yeah.
You are already married. You are the bondwoman of the king.
Yes, I am.
You are a married woman, and I am your queen. I'm the one who brings you to my husband for his pleasure, isn't it, Asnat?
Yes, my queen.
That is how blessed the king is.
Yeah.
He is so blessed.
Yes, this is the king's portion. This is his birthright as a king, to have as many women as he desires. So again, this is just a little inside scoop, a very sacred ordinance.
The holiest form of marriage.
Yes.
This is very identical to the marriage of Jacob. Our ancestor and his wives and concubines.
Yes.
A more advanced version of it, purified by Yahweh for such a time as this.
Yes, my queen.
Where polygamy is going to be the norm.
Speak, my queen.
This is where we are going. We are almost even there, 1 foot into the new world.
Yeah.
All women, no men will be there because they're all going to be destroyed.
Yeah.
So polygamy is the new way of life. Embrace it now, my handmaiden, as you have done. Be like Asnat, the bondwoman of the king. Kubala, Kubala.
Iliswe.
Kubala, Kubala.
Iliswe.
Ziona
is here.
Hello guys, I hope you're doing super great, and today we are looking at the truth about the Kingdom of Kubala. First of all, let's look at the beliefs of Kingdom of Kubala. They claim to be the lost tribe of Hebrews, purported descendants of King David, and assert that their ancestors referred to as Black Jacobites, were deported from Scotland during the reign of Elizabeth II, roughly 400 years ago. They also assert that Scotland is the true biblical Zion, not the Middle East. Their settlement is framed as spiritual pilgrimage, a second exodus to fulfill prophecy and reclaim their ancestral land. But that is the one side of the story. Let's look at the reality. The so-called Kingdom of Kubala is a contemporary group that has set up a camp in the woodlands near Jeddah, Scotland. Its key features include King Atehene, real name Kofi Ofe, a 36-year-old, a former opera singer from Ghana. Queen Nandi, born Jean Ngasho, 43-year-old, originally a nurse from Zimbabwe. A woman named Kaura Taylor from Texas, now going by Asnat or Lady Safi. She was reported missing and unfortunately she later died. We'll get that in the story. And what I want to say is that even here in Africa, we have got such stories. Of recent, we had an instance of a pastor in a place called Shakahola in East Africa. And what was happening is that you are actually giving her the all wealth that you have, and then you are subjected to kind of prayer and fasting, and you fast until you die. Several bodies were discovered, and of course we had another long story of a guy called Jehovah Wanyonyi here in East Africa also, who had married several wives. And you know, that is the same story in the Kubala, because the same way those kings or leaders of such particular religion, I don't know what they do to actually brainwash you. I don't know what they actually do to brainwash you. And when you look at the molarities, that they have the same behavior, marrying many wives. They don't even consider whether you had kids or you had another family. Provided you are available, you are beautiful, you become the wife to the king. And what happened to this guy, I think that he was so much worshipped until when he almost believed that he is God. And one day he woke up and said that he will go to heaven, and by climbing a tree. And when the time came at the top of the tree, she actually fell down and died. And I believe that despite wanting to associate with you know, the old way, the African way of worshiping, I believe that we should not be hit by identity crisis, such that immediately you see a black guy performing something looks like African religion, and then you want to fall for it. I think what I always say about religion is that as a grown person, there is nothing much that you can learn from religion apart from what you know. And when you go to a religion, carry your brains. That is what I always say when you go to any particular religion. But I also get the concept, because when you look at the both religions, at one particular point, as an African or as a black person, you will reach a point you see that this was not originally how our ancestor actually worshipped, and therefore you would want something different. And that is what I think that tricked this lady called Kaura Taylor. But unfortunately things did not go well for her. I have got several videos explaining several reaction explaining actually what is happening in Kubala Kingdom. and I have actually researched about those videos, and most of them, they are giving very real reaction, and kudos to those content creators. Let's continue educating and sharing to our black brothers and sisters in diaspora and even in Africa and Caribbean. But I know, of course, right now there is some up and down with some saying they don't want to associate with breeds, but that is for those people who choose to do that. Me, as per me, I will always see any black person as my brother, as my sister. Let's dive in and watch the videos to get the whole glimpse of the Kubala kingdom.
Okay, part 2 of the Kingdom of Kubala. I don't even know what to call this, to be honest. Okay, and thank you for your patience. Thank you for bearing with me. Some of you were patient. Some of you were messaging me and all sorts. But like, I'm humble rest for you. Okay, I have to work. I'm doing my best. So I believe it's fairly early on in the marriage that Nino, you know, floats the idea of being a polygamist to Jean. And Jean on her blog says that this wasn't news to her. She was familiar with polygamy. I believe her dad, who is quite a pivotal figure in her life, and we will come back to him later on, I believe he had multiple wives, so it wasn't something that she was unfamiliar with. She was, in theory, okay with the concept. In practice, though, it seemed like Jean actually really struggled with sharing Nino in the early stages. A lot of the blog posts, so I will say her blog is still up. However, she has done a lot of editing. She has done a lot of censoring. She's deleted a lot of the blog posts that documented the Shulamite and the Hagar era. But it's okay. I remember. The wives were always fighting. There was always a lot of cattiness, a lot of bitterness, a lot of like bitchiness about how long he was spending with who. He would pretend to go to bed with Jean in the night, and then he would wake up at like 2 a.m. and then go and sneak out and stay in Shulamite's room. And then when they brought Hagar on the scene, Hagar was like a whole different kettle of fish, because she, while Shulamite was Ghanaian, Hagar was described as being Asian. And for like any Americans that are watching in the UK, Asian, the term Asian is usually used to describe somebody of South Asian descent. So she was of South Asian descent, and she was also painted out to have quite a good job. I believe she worked in finance, and Shulamite also had a good job. He actually met Shulamite in university, and then encountered her, invited her to an event in the UK years later, and reconnected in that way, and then, you know, made a move on her, proposed to her, took her home and said, "You're going to be my second wife." And then he pretty much did the same thing with Hagar. So that trio of wives fell apart, and Hagar was demoted to a concubine because she brought an engagement ring and proposed to Nino in one of the service departments, which was apparently a big no-no. Like, he is the one to make the move on the woman like that. He is the one to let them know when they are going to, you know, be stepping into their next role, because there's a hierarchy in the household. So yeah, it goes Nino, Jean as the first wife, second wife, and then the concubine, or whoever that is below the second wife. The concubine, from Jean's writing, she makes it seem like they're just there for physical pleasure, whereas the wives will be the ones that bear the children and the heirs of Kubala, or the Northern Kingdom. So Jean as a mother, I would say that Jean was a good mom. Mind you, when she met Nino, she had 6 children. They did have another baby together. So it was initially 7 children that they had. Blended that family, he accepted them all, and they were just one big family. They were one big happy family. From what you could see online, Jean was a good mom. She enjoyed parenting. She enjoyed having as many children as she did. So then Shulamite gets pregnant. So Jean really gets jealous here, because up until this point she is the one that bears the children, and she sort of has that title, and now by Shulamite getting pregnant it sort of shuffles things up in the household. Again, there are a lot of posts about crying wives, about like cattiness. I believe that Shulamite shaved off Jean's eyebrows at one point, I'm not sure. A lot of like cattiness over cooking food, taking care of the children, and Shulamite begins to, post her own blog. She begins to document her story of Nino in her own words. Again, I will leave it up here so you guys can go and read it. The thing that I find most disturbing about Shulamite is the fact that she disappears. She disappears. The last we hear of her, she is pregnant. Hagar, the third wife / concubine, has been exiled, and that's all we hear. That's the last that we hear of Shulamite, which I think is concerning. I hope and I pray that, she just left, she caught some sense, and she's raising her child somewhere in peace. So there was a period where it was like fairly uneventful, right? There was no Shulamite, there was no Hagar. I believe Jean was pregnant, so a lot of her blogs were about taking care of her children, which again, I believe she was a good mum. However, during this uneventful time is when we see the birth, I suppose, of the House of Ophir. The House of Ophir, which then later on becomes the Northern Kingdom, which later on becomes Kubala, okay? And that's where, during that moment of that sort of era of peace and quiet, is when he sort of brings forth this House of Ophir, and they begin, in their blog post, she starts to talk about maybe like some type of, how can I say this? I wouldn't say rituals, but actually, yeah, some of them were rituals, and I feel like that's what she says, that's what she calls them as well. A lot of ceremonies and dinners and feasts to bring in this new era of the House of Ophir.
Kubala, Ilizwe. Oh my Lord, I am so honored and so blessed to be your queen, your most beloved, your wife. In this moment, we've just said our Sabbath, and we've come to the end of our Sabbath today, and it's been pouring down all day in the Kingdom of Kubala on this mountain. And in the past 30 minutes, we've just been out in the rain whilst it's pouring and pouring down.
Performing our rituals.
Yes, my king. We did our rituals in the rain. We are connecting to nature. We are returning to innocence.
Now this is Lady Safi, real name Aaliyah Johnson, who left the US, but she's a citizen at 18 or 19 to join the Kingdom of Kubala, where she was promised a life of royalty, but the truth was far darker. She was entering a cult. Now, when Lady Safi entered the Kingdom of Kubala, she was made to be Kofi's second wife. The first wife, Jean, made it pretty clear to her that she was the queen and that Safi was just the handmaiden. Safi was drawn into the cult's rituals, led by the king and queen. They promised her a luxurious life, when in reality, she was being controlled. Now, during her time, it was thought that Lady Safi was pregnant, but Jean confronted her in front of Kofi and exposed it as a lie. Safi eventually left the UK to head back to the US, where she suffered with her mental health and was eventually struck by a car and a bus and did not survive. Now, this so-called queen has gone on her platforms to state that the reason for Safi's death is because the king of Kubala put a curse on her because she did not obey him. This is something that her family has rejected, and rightly so. They have already stated that Safi did indeed suffer with mental health. And what I find more disturbing is the fact that this cult actually were recruiting online for a new wife for Kofi. There was actually an application process. Single mothers pay a fee of £500 to be considered for a date and to spend the weekend with him. No intimacy. And if you have no children, you pay a fee of £350 to be considered for a date. If you are a virgin, however, you get this free, but this must be medically tested and proven. No intimacy. £350 to £500 for a date with him, or to be considered for one anyway. But no, Jean, Lady Safi wasn't cursed. She was groomed and manipulated by you and your husband. Your husband that claimed to be a property manager, when in reality he was subletting Airbnbs, and this is the same person that wants us to believe he is the descendant of the King of David. But I would just like to say, rest in peace to this absolutely beautiful girl, and I really do hope that you are at peace now.